Hi, I'm here to talk to you about your vehicle and what happens to it if you don't wash it. What happens is, in most situations, the newer vehicles have got plastic and metal both. The fenders from about this point on the front back to the doors will rot away, and your rear fenders from about here on back to the rear of the very rear of the vehicle will rot out. Around your tail lamps, your rear bumpers, your front bumpers, under the grill, the headlamp area, your fender wells, inside, underneath the hood, will begin to deteriorate. Your door jambs, the whole door jamb, the trunk deck or lid will rot out across the back. The floorboard of the trunk will rot away. The floor of the car itself will rot out. The areas underneath the vehicle that need to be concentrated on are anywhere that the frame and the body mount together, the exhaust, the differentials. In most of the front wheel drive vehicles, the carrier frame or K-frame goes underneath this part of the car, and where it mounts to the body will rot out, and where it mounts to your header pan will rot away, which makes it extremely unsafe because the engine can fall out of it. In situations with the older vehicles, the spring mounts or body mounts for the rear suspension, the control arms or the leaf springs would rot away from the control arms, and they would come through the floorboards. The area where the roof and the body join will rot out. Your hoods will begin to rot at the fronts. The roof will rot right at the top of the windshield, at the back window, the top of it. Underneath the rear window will rot away. The fenders on the older vehicles would start approximately here and come all the way up and back, which would cause tail lamps to fall off. Would also cause the rear springs to come through the rear floorboard into the rear seats. You ask, what makes me an expert on these situations? The fact is, what makes me an expert on these situations is I had an old pickup that was literally a Flintstone mobile. My wife would not ride in it because your feet hung out of the truck. She was afraid that we'd have to put our feet down in order to stop the truck because it was in such bad shape. And in order to take off, she thought we might have to run like the Flintstones had to do with their Flintstone mobile. The truck was in such bad shape, the front fenders, when you were driving it down the road, would wave at passerbys. They literally shook back and forth because there was nothing connecting them at the bottom. The only part where they were connected was where you open the hood, the bolts at the very top of the fender to the fender well, which your fender stands like this. You've got a lip that hangs out that the hood closes onto. Underneath of it, there's a row of bolts that holds the fender and inner fender together. Well, that was all rotted away. So the fenders would literally shake and vibrate and look like the truck was waving at you. The rear fenders on the bed, they would stand upright as long as the truck wasn't moving. When the truck started moving, the fenders would do this. The floorboard of the bed was rotted away so bad that all you could see were these strips going across the bed that held the fenders actually in place above the rear wheels. The floorboard was rotted out so bad that somebody had thrown a piece of plywood in the butt of the truck for a bed instead of replacing it. This happened before I bought the truck. The front floorboards, as I said, my wife was afraid to ride in the truck because she was afraid we'd have to play the Flintstones with it. The springs on the rear of the truck, the leaf springs, were in such bad disrepair that you'd be driving down the road and literally the ends of the leaf springs were breaking off and falling out of it. The truck was literally unsafe to be driving on the road. I drove the truck religiously every day. The truck was the only thing in the neighborhood that restarted on a regular basis. I did home remodeling for a company that went out of business. That was my work vehicle. That was my vehicle I took to the shop, and then I would pick up a company truck. And the boss was so embarrassed by my truck that he had me park it behind the shop. The truck, as I said, would start every day, no problems. I would jump people off of a morning to leave for work. I would come home at night from work. My neighbor would have me jump him off so he could go to work at night. And then he would have to have somebody jump him off at night or in the morning when he started to leave from work to come home. He told me one time in no uncertain terms that he wished he had the engine that was in my truck because it was so dependable. The bad thing about the truck is, like I said, it was rotted away. The reason it was rotted away is because it was not cleaned properly. The bed at the rear, you could not keep a tailgate on it because it was rotted away so bad that the fenders would actually gyrate and the tailgate would pop loose and fall off of it. The instance with the springs, my brother had a 72 Camaro that rotted out. The rear leaf springs came through the rear floorboard into the rear seat. If my niece and nephew had been in the car, it would have hurt them very badly. The Camaro was literally unsafe to drive prior to the seats coming through, the springs coming through the rear seats. The spring assemblies on the frame, literally, the welds on them literally broke away from the rust on the frame. The newer vehicles, you have a rear axle, you don't have a rear differential, which is your pumpkin, your axles, your chunk that can be replaced inside the differential. The newer vehicles have got just a plain axle, which is a straight bar basically underneath the vehicle. If it rots away, the assemblies to hold it in place, if they rot away, they do one of two things. They either come through the rear floorboard, or the rear axle rolls out from underneath the vehicle and bounces it off the ground, destroying the body. The older vehicles, like I said, the rear springs would come through the floorboards. The transmissions would fall out. Thank you.